All right. So last week we did our introduction to the book of Daniel. So if you missed it, there's a lot of good stuff there. When was Daniel written? About-ish. What time frame does Daniel cover?
It's like the Babylonian siege on Israel.
Yes. Okay. So New Testament, Old Testament.
Old Testament.
Old Testament. You got it. So Old Testament. And anybody know any of the years that we're talking about?
The 70 years of no temple.
Right, but I'm talking about dates, actual dates.
Oh, 605 to 535.
605 to 5. You were close. You were only off by 100 years, but that's very close. All right, and who wrote the book of Daniel?
Not Daniel.
Isaiah.
Y'all don't be smart now. We might have a test. If I can't give you the easy ones, I don't know what's going to happen. All right, so we know Daniel wrote the book of Daniel. How do we know that?
He says so.
Oh, see, you don't have the answer to that one. How about Jesus quotes Daniel multiple times, right? Yeah, Jesus actually talks about the prophet Daniel. So we can take Jesus's word for it, I think, right? If he got it wrong, then if he got the author of Daniel wrong, then we have other issues we better worry about with what Jesus tells us. So we'll take him at his word. Tonight we're going to see one of the big themes of God, themes of the book, which is in terms of the sovereignty of God. But I want to start out by asking you a question. What is the definition of character?
Character as in, like, it'll help you build character.
Yes, right?
Okay, I heard a character and I was confused.
No, not a character as in a book, but your character, or my character, or Dash's character.
It's like who you are and how you portray yourself, who you like actually are on the inside, and how you think about things and do things.
Okay, so who else has got an idea?
I guess your general traits.
Your general traits, okay. What does it mean to be of good character? He's a man of good character or a woman of good character. What does that mean, Emily?
That you're respected by others and you generally do good things.
Generally do good things, respected by others. Why would you be respected by others?
Because you're virtuous.
Okay, you're virtuous. And what does that include? What kind of traits make up a good character?
Integrity.
Integrity, okay. What else?
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness.
All right, Dash is repeating the fruit of the Spirit, which is perhaps
Am I wrong?
fruitful. No, you're not wrong, but
No, you're right. Don't answer that.
you are sitting in the whacking chair. Just remember that.
I've got the laugh secure.
How about somebody who does what they say? Right? Like somebody is a good, you wouldn't say that somebody who promises to do a bunch of things and then doesn't do them has a great character, would you? He might be a nice person, or she might be a great, a lot of fun to be around, but not a lot of integrity or follow through. So the original meaning and the simple meaning of the word character is an engraving, something carved or inscribed in a man's nature. It's the potential fact about the man, the inmost truth of him written upon his personality, which on the whole, his fellow men can read and perceive accurately. So it is the man's own character, the writing engraved within himself, which shall be read and which shall determine his doom or bliss. When do you form your character?
You're kind of always forming your character.
Okay, you're always forming your character. That's true. But think about a journey that you're on, right? Is it easier to change course at your age or at my age? Well, you're pretty sure of yourselves, aren't you? But that's true, right? When you start forming your character at your age, right? And even before your age, right? Your character starts out from a very young age. And it's influenced by a lot of things, right? It's influenced by your school, it's influenced by your parents, it's influenced by your church, it's influenced by your friends, it's influenced by what you see on TV and what society thinks is okay or not okay. All of these things influence who you are and what your character is. I've heard character said, character is who you are when nobody else is looking, right? Because it's one thing to do what's right or to act well when you're in front of an audience. It's another thing when, you're in your car driving down the street, somebody cuts you off. Or, yeah, you're all kind of smiling at that one, aren't you? It's another thing when you're by yourself and you're tempted to look at something you probably shouldn't be looking at. It's another thing to, be tempted to lie to somebody when you're the only person who really knows the truth. Or to say that you didn't see something that you really did when you're asked about it. And all of these things are elements of our character and what makes a good character and what makes a character that's not so good, right? So we're going to talk about character tonight because we're going to see the character of Daniel and his friends. Now remember, we're in 605 BC. Our friend Nebuchadnezzar has come and laid siege to Jerusalem. And this is the first siege. Okay, do you remember why he was sieging Jerusalem? Where was he on his way to?
Egypt.
Egypt, yeah, he was heading south because the Egyptians and the Babylonians were kind of two big empires and they were getting into it on a regular basis. So 605 BC, he comes and he spends some time in Jerusalem. And let's turn to Daniel chapter 1 and let's read verses 1 through 7. So we're going to do, I'm going to put some on here. Daniel 1, 1 through 7. I want somebody to look up Isaiah 39, 6 and 7. And I want somebody to look up Jeremiah 27, 1 through 15. Okay? So who's got what?
I got Jeremiah.
You got Jeremiah? Okay, who's got Daniel? First part. You got Daniel? All right, give me Daniel 1, 1 through 7.
In the third year of the reign of
Jehoiakim.
Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord carried Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, over to him, along with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. Then the king told Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family of the nobles, youths in whom there is no impairment, who are good looking, suitable for instruction in every kind of expertise, endowed with understanding and discerning knowledge, and who had ability to serve in the king's court. And he ordered Ashpenaz to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. The king also allotted for them a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank, and ordered that they be educated for 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service. Now among them, from the sons of Judah, were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he assigned the name Belshazzar, to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego.
Okay, great, thank you. So we spent a lot of time last week on the history, right? We're in the third year of King Jehoiakim, his reign, and Nebuchadnezzar comes and he's going to take a bunch of people back to Babylon, okay? And so in this first group of people, Daniel and his 3 friends are part of the group that go back. So here you are, and how old did we say he was in general, we think, when this happened? 15-ish, right? Yeah, so you're 15, 16, 14, and you are plucked from your family by the invading king. Okay, so let's say here we are, the Russians come in tonight, and they say, great, all of you guys are going with us. And we don't know whether you're able to see your parents again or not, but you're coming with us and you can't really resist, right? And your parents can't really resist. So you're going to go back to Moscow and they're going to teach you all these Russian things, okay? So here they are. This is what happened. Who found Isaiah for me? Everybody got Isaiah 39 verses 6 and 7?
I got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house, and that which your fathers have stored up to this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says the Lord. And some of your own sons, who will come from you, whom you will father, shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon.
Okay. So, who knows when Isaiah wrote? Go ahead. Say it. Say the answer you said last time.
700.
Hey, about 720 BC or so, right? It's about 120 years before the events of Daniel. So Isaiah as a prophet comes before Daniel and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, okay? And so those three guys, Daniel, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, they're all around at the same time. They're all writing at about the same time, okay? So what was the key thing in those verses that told us that Isaiah is a prophet?
I think there were the words, says the Lord.
Says the Lord, right? Remember, a prophet is somebody that God speaks to directly and says, hey, I got a message for the people. I'm going to give it to you. You're going to say, thus says the Lord, and pass it on. And if anybody says, thus says the Lord, but it didn't come to pass, you were supposed to stone them. Okay, so that was a false prophet. So Isaiah says, hey, there's a time coming when you're going to carry it away to Babylon. In fact, some of your young people are going to get carried away. And what's the word that that is there at the end of those verses that you use? What are they going to become? Eunuchs.
Eunuchs.
All right, well, let's talk. We'll talk later about that because your version of Daniel has one translation of something, and I bet yours is going to say eunuchs.
Yeah, eunuchs a lot.
I was going to say, yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about that and what that may mean. All right, so it's interesting, right? Daniel says in verse 2, how did this come to pass, right? Verse 2 of Daniel.
Dad, wait.
What?
What was the Jeremiah verse?
I'm sorry, I missed you. What?
What was the Jeremiah verse?
The Jeremiah verses are 27, 1 through 15. We're going to get there right in a minute. But
Okay.
in leading off in Daniel chapter 1, verse 2, what has happened? Why is all of this occurring? It's the first three words or so.
The Lord gave.
The Lord gave, right? So this is the Lord gave, okay? So all of this is happening because God's sovereign will said, hey, this is what's going to happen, right? And these boys are going to end up in Babylon because the Lord gave Jehoiakim into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. We talked about why that was last week. We talked about, remember, the Israelites or the Hebrews had not celebrated the Sabbath for the land every 7 years. And so they had failed to do that for 490 years, which meant they were going to be subject to 70 years of captivity. Okay. And so that's why the Lord is allowing all of this to happen. He says back in Deuteronomy, he says, look, if you follow my rules and live in the land the way I tell you to do and follow the law, life is going to be really sweet for you guys. That's all you have to do. I got a list of rules here. Just follow them. All's going to be well. You're going to be powerful, and you're going to be well fed, and everything's going to go your way because I'm going to be on your side. But if you don't do that, well, you're going to get carried off into a land that you don't know, your fathers didn't know, and you're going to, all sorts of curses and things like that that are going to befall you. And of course, the Israelites don't follow the rules. That's the whole story of the Old Testament. That's the purpose of the law as we get into the New Testament and we listen to Paul tell us what the law does. It tells us you don't know that you're sinning unless you have a standard against which to judge sin. Right? So that's what the law did. The law said, hey, this is okay, this is not okay, just like that stop sign out there. that stop sign wasn't there, you wouldn't know whether you were supposed to stop at that corner or not, right? You just breeze on through. That stop sign being there says, hey, you better stop. And if you don't stop, you're breaking the law. Okay, so it really is are you following the rule or are you not following the rule? Regardless of whether there's going to be any consequences to running that stop sign, as we often find in Katie. All right, let's look at Jeremiah verses 27, 1 through 15. Who said they had that? Dash, was that you?
Yes.
All right, give us a reading. Oh, Top Gun pilot.
All right. Early in the reign of Zedekiah, son of Josiah, king of Judah, the word came to Jeremiah from the Lord. This is what the Lord said to me. Make a yoke out of straps and crossbars and put it on your neck. Then send word to the kings of Edom, Moab, and Ammon, Tyre, Sidon, the envoys who have come to Jerusalem to Zedekiah, king of Judah. Give them a message for their masters and say, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel says. Tell this to your masters. With my great power outstretched arm, I make this earth and its people and the animals that are on it, and I give it to anyone I please. Now I will give all your countries into the hands of my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. I will make even the wild animals subject to him. All nations will serve him, and his son and his grandson, until the time for his land comes. Then many nations and great kings will subjugate him. If, however, any nation or kingdom will not serve Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, or bow its neck under his yoke, I will punish the nation with the sword, famine, and plague, declares the Lord, until I destroy it by his hand. So do not listen to your prophets, your diviners, your interpreters of dreams, your mediums, or your sorcerers who tell you, you will not serve the king of Babylon. They prophesy lies to you only that you will only serve to remove you far from your lands. I will banish you and you will perish. But if any nation will bow its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, I will let that nation remain in its own land to till it and live there, declares the Lord.
All right, well, let's stop there because the verses 12 through 15 is Jeremiah telling the king the same thing. So look at verse 6. Well, actually look at verse 4. And again, we've got this idea of thus saith the Lord, right? The Lord has spoken to Jeremiah. Jeremiah is writing at the same time, right? He is in Jerusalem while Ezekiel and Daniel are in Babylon. And he says, look, what is he telling the kings around here? What's the point of this little speech?
That they should serve Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, right? That, hey, look, in verse 6, and now I have given these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, whether he knows it or not, is a servant of the Lord. And all of this is going to play out, right? Because God has decreed it. Okay, so guess what? You could be doing the Lord's work, or somebody around you could. Was Nebuchadnezzar a guy who knew the Lord? No, not initially, right? We're going to find out later on he's going to come face to face with God. Not literally, but he's going to have a very close encounter, okay? And yet, he's a servant. He is doing what God wants. God has put him in a place, and he's set him on a path, and he's directing things, and Nebuchadnezzar is going to be full of power, and he's going to take over the known world because that's what God wanted to happen, right? And it didn't have to be Nebuchadnezzar. It could have been, Fred the Babylonian or, whoever, right? But it was Nebuchadnezzar. So Jeremiah is clearly having to deal with what some of the problems that Jeremiah has that he's warning against here in this set of verses. False prophets, right? So all of these kings, including the king of Israel, including Jehoiakim, have all these guys around him who say, hey, we've had a vision. Don't worry. You're not going to serve Nebuchadnezzar. All is going to be well. And for only $5.95, I can predict exactly how that's going to go for you, right? Because you know that you don't become a false prophet without the idea of profit, right? That's what they're doing, right? They're filling the king's head full of stories. And what's Jeremiah say? What's he telling them? Don't listen to those guys. I know I have the message that's really unpopular, right? I'm going to give it to you for free. You don't even have to pay me for it. But guess what? If you listen to those guys, bad things are going to happen to you and your land. And if you don't listen to those guys, if you listen to me and you listen to what the Lord has told me to tell you, you're going to stay in your land. You're going to stay the king. You're going to till your land. Yes, you'll serve Nebuchadnezzar, but guess what? It's going to be okay. And so, unfortunately, the Israelites don't bother to listen. And you can see it's not just addressed to the Israelites, it's addressed to Tyre and Sidon and the Ammonites and things like that. All right, Shinar, right? That's where all of these things were taken. Shinar is another name for Babylon. Right, so when you find that name Shinar, it's that idea of Babylon. Now, where is Babylon? I know you've all been waiting for this. Yes, it's time. Time to draw a map. What's the door song? What?
You have a fancy board, so it's gonna be easier to draw, right?
Ooh, I don't know. Did you get the self-drawing board? All right, here we are. This is Africa. Let's see. Here's kind of the Red Sea. Here's Saudi Arabia. Okay, now we come up. Hey. Be no chuckling. All right, there's come up here. We come around. Here, I think this is like Tyre. That means Israel is sort of right in here. Now over here, okay, on the other side of Saudi Arabia, so this actually comes up, it comes over here like that. This is the Persian Gulf. If you're Iranian, if you're an Arab, that's the Arabian Gulf, right? Just make sure if you go to that part of the world, you call it the right thing, because don't call it the Persian Gulf when you're in Saudi Arabia, and don't call it the Arabian Gulf if you go to Iran, if that ever happens. Okay, so you got these two rivers over here, too. Anybody know which two rivers these are?
Tigris and Euphrates.
Yeah, I think the Euphrates is here, the Tigris is actually over here, and Babylon is somewhere here. It's in a place called Mesopotamia. Who's heard of that? What's it mean?
Something like good land or fertile land.
No.
Oh, I'm wrong. Lol.
Stop. He looked it up. Mesopotamia, between the rivers. Okay, Meso meaning the middle. Who's ever been to Washington, D.C.? All right. There's a river in Washington, D.C. What's it called?
The
Potomac, right? Well, Potomac means river. So the river in Washington, D.C. is actually named the River, right?
Wow.
Okay, so Mesopotamia is the middle of the rivers or between the rivers. Okay, and that's where we think that's the region the Garden of Eden was ultimately in, right? Now, obviously, it doesn't look the way it did, back when the Garden of Eden was there. Okay, so that's where we are now. Nebuchadnezzar has brought these guys there, and in fact, he has taken some of the vessels out of the house of God. Well, what's the house of God? The temple. And he's carried them into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels of treasury to the house of his God. Well, who are Nebuchadnezzar's gods?
No.
All right, the chief god was called Bel, or sometimes called Marduk, M-A-R-D-U-K. Okay, and his symbol was the dragon, and he was connected to the planet of Jupiter, because Babylon is ultimately where a lot of the astrology and astronomy is founded and starts up. And Bel means Lord. Now, in these times, right, gods were thought to be regional. So, yeah, this might be the God of Israel down here, we'll say this is, let's see, Yahweh. He's down here, right? And this is Bel up here. And it was generally believed that if you went and you took over these guys, well, that meant your God was stronger than their God. Okay? Right? My God beats your God. Okay? So now they're going to come back. So it's not surprising here that Nebuchadnezzar doesn't have a lot of respect for the temple or the vessels of the temple or the priesthood or their beliefs or anything else. That's very, very kind of natural. Now, there's another, if you look at Nebuchadnezzar's name, Lauren, you probably can't even see the red, can you?
I can't see anything really. It's very blurry.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's really nice though. Nebuchadnezzar. The front part of his name is Nebu. Well, Nebu, he's actually the son of Bel. Okay? And Nebu is the god of wisdom in the Babylonian pantheon. All right, now so Nebuchadnezzar, right, was named after the god of wisdom, as was his father, Nabopolassar. So just as we're going to talk about the names that Daniel and his friends get, right? Just as Daniel's name has God in it, El, right? So the Babylonians would name their children after the gods of their country. Okay, that makes sense? All right, so we'll talk about what happens here. So just remember, some of the vessels, some of the cups and the plates and the goblets and the serving things, all that stuff have been taken back to Babylon now, and they're stored in the treasure house of Bel. Okay? In chapter 5, they're going to make a reappearance. They're going to show up again. Okay? So Nebuchadnezzar has gotten some souvenirs and he's brought them home, and we're all good. All right, so when he comes home, he takes some people like Daniel and his friends with him. What was he looking for? What were the characteristics of the people that he takes with him?
Wrong.
Okay, oh, we got a bunch of things going on here. We got intelligent.
Oh, I got it. Good looking and quick to understand.
Good looking.
No blemish.
No physical defects.
No physical defects. So, in other words, he picked a group of kids just like you guys. Okay?
Aww.
I know, isn't that nice? And what's the last thing? Had the potential to serve where? Before the king, right? So they're going to go to serve, right? And why does he pick people like this? What's he going to do? What's the order that the chief of the eunuchs or the master of the officials is supposed to follow? Why is he picking people like this?
So eunuchs are meant to guard the king's harem, right? Yes.
Well, yes, maybe, but that's not what's in play here. It actually tells you why.
I would say they're going to be well respected by the other Israelites, or at least looked up to.
But what are they going to do with Daniel and his buddies?
I would teach them.
Teach them. Teach them what?
Babylonian stuff.
Babylonian stuff. Exactly right. They're going to teach them the wisdom and the culture and the language of the Babylonians. Why? And that gets back to what Drew is saying, which is, look, we're going to take these guys who are well respected. Some of them are princes. You know, Daniel and his buddies may have been sons of noblemen, right? And we're going to teach them Babylonian stuff. And when they learn the Babylonian stuff, other people are going to look up to them and say, well, if they can learn the Babylonian stuff and they're cool with it, we should be cool with it too. Right? He's going to brainwash them. That's what he's setting out to do. He's setting out to take all these kids and teach them about Babylon and why Babylon is so great. They're going to go to the Babylon propaganda school and try to learn everything they can. And if they do, they're going to serve the king. So you got a pretty good incentive, right? So I want you to think about today. Don't necessarily think about getting, like I said earlier, grabbed from the living room and taken to Russia. I want you to think about where you go today, what you're going to do. You work, you guys are in school. What's happening? When you go to school, what do you learn?
Evolution is real.
Everything that's real?
No, that evolution is real.
That evolution is real. Okay. All right. So that's one thing you might learn. What else? What else might you hear? Now, you guys are at St. Mary's, but I guarantee you, even at St. Mary's, just the way it was at Mary Hardin Baylor, I guarantee you got some professors there who are not Catholic. Or even if they are Catholic, they don't believe the same, a conservative Catholic viewpoint.
Correct.
Right?
I've had to walk out of certain, not classrooms, but certain like events they posted as like Bible study things. I just walked out because I couldn't stand some of the things that they were saying.
Because it's not, right? It's like, oh, this isn't real. Daniel didn't write Daniel. This is, written a lot later. I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? Probably even worse.
And you're like, you're just ignoring the text, really. So
Right.
There's no point for me to be here.
Exactly right. So everywhere you go today, everywhere I go today, everything we watch, everything we listen to on TV is designed to sway us one way or another, right? You guys actually, your age group are the most powerful economic age group in the country, right? You guys have lots of disposable money generally, right? Teenagers, young adults, right? You generally are the people who are out buying stuff. You're very susceptible to the latest trends and fashions, right? Think about people that and maybe not necessarily as homeschoolers, but think about people that who, hey, something comes out, I gotta have it, right? The latest tennis shoe, the latest, sweater, whatever it is. Back when I was growing up, if you didn't have a little alligator on your shirt, the Izod stuff, you were nothing, until it wasn't the alligator anymore, it became the polo guy, right? And then it became the sailboat for Nautica, right? All these different brands and stuff. Well, I want to read you some quotes. Education is thus a most powerful ally of humanism, and every public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday school, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of 5-day programs of humanistic teachings? That was written 1890s or so, right? More than 150 years ago, or 130 years ago, I guess we actually do that, right? But think about it. Think about how many years. Let's say you were a public school kid. You started in kindergarten, and you went to the age of, let's say you graduated at 18, and you spent 8 hours a day for roughly, at least when we were growing up, it was 180 school days. How many hours of classroom instruction would that be over that time of your life?
A lot.
Okay, over 20,000. Now, let's also say that you are one of the relative few, out of all your public school peers who does go to church. And not only you go to church, you go to Sunday school at church. So you're there 2 hours on Sunday, and you also go to Wednesday night Bible study or Sunday night Bible study, right? So you got 3 hours a week that the church has you. That's going to be about 2,100 hours. Over that, if you never missed, you never got sick, you never slept in, you never went on vacation, you were there every time the church was open, about 10% of the time that your public school teachers have you. Or will have your kids, if you have kids and you send them to school. You don't really, and think about when they come home. Well, first of all, they're going to do after school stuff, right? So I didn't even count, the coaches and the sports events, the plays, the bands, and things like that. But then you're going to come home and you're going to do, you're going to do homework. which is going to reinforce the stuff. Yeah, my throat's dry. Which is going to reinforce the stuff you learned in class. So let's say now your parents, I don't know, they get to talk to you an hour or two a day, maybe. So they don't really have much more influence over you than the church did. And yet what parents do is they throw their kids in Sunday school and they say, well, good, church, hey, you guys are the ones who are supposed to teach them about all that God stuff, about all that spirituality stuff. Good luck. Let us know how it goes. There's no chance. Thank you. Abraham Lincoln said, the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. Look at politics today. Okay? I can tell you that people who are young congressmen, who grew up in a public school system, they're very easy to spot, in general. And it's not a surprise. Lincoln was right. So and when was Lincoln around?
1860s.
Ah, good. 1860s. All right. Let me read this one. This is from Chester M. Pierce. He is a professor of education and psychiatry, or he was at Harvard University. And he said this in 1972. So he said this 50 years ago. He said, every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with certain allegiances to our founding fathers, towards our elected officials, toward his parents, toward a belief in a supernatural being, and toward the sovereignty of this nation as a separate entity. It is up to you as teachers to make all of these sick children well by creating the international child of the future. So here's a guy in the 1970s who is basically saying that everything that the parents have taught up until the age of 5 is wrong. And these would have been more conservative parents, right? Back in the, people who are not as old as I am now in 1970, but let's say in their 30s or 40s, who were raised in the 50s in a more traditional America, if you will, than we had in the 70s, and certainly than we have today. George Orwell, who's read 1984? You haven't read, you are an author and you haven't read 1984? You got to go read that.
Part of it, I never finished.
I've read Animal Farm.
Okay, well, kind of not the same thing, but same author. So Orwell says in 84, he says, he who controls the present controls the future, and he who controls the future controls the past. And one of the things you read in the book, right, is what are they constantly doing with the past? What is the government constantly doing? They're constantly rewriting the past. Like today, when you go to the bookstore or the newspaper store, you read, oh, we're at war with country A. Tomorrow, something's happened, and they've totally deleted all references to a war with company A, and you read it and say, oh, we've been at war with country B for 10 years. And then 2 weeks later, you might be at war with country C. And one of the themes of the book is about information and control of government and how they just totally change it all the time. 1963, there's a list of 45 current communist goals that gets read into the congressional record. Okay, so this was originally from a book in 1958 called The Naked Communist. In 63, these same excerpts are read out of it. One of these was number 17: get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put the party line in textbooks. 1963. That's what the communists said. The communists said, if we can do that, that's one of the 45 things. But if you go read that list of 45 today, you basically said, okay, they won, game over. Maybe we should start, let's play a new game, because they've kind of checked off everything they wanted to do. And that's one of them. So the whole point of why am I saying this, right? Don't think that because we're talking about, 4 teenagers in 600 BC, that this isn't relevant to your lives. The same tactics that Nebuchadnezzar is using or plans to use on Daniel and his friends are the same tactics that are being used against you, to get you to think a certain way, to get you to act a certain way, to believe a certain way, to believe that some things are okay and some things aren't okay, right? This kind of the idea of tolerance and what does that mean and who's really tolerant and who's really not tolerant, right? All of that's about propaganda. And so that's what Nebuchadnezzar is putting these really smart, good-looking TikTok influencers of the day through, because they're going to make the 15-second videos, and all the other Hebrew kids are going to download them and watch them and go, hey, man, that's cool. Let's do that. And there you are. You win. You won. Okay, so just remember that, right? All right, what's something else that Nebuchadnezzar does to the gods? He gives them what?
His food.
He's going to give them his food, but before he even feeds them,
Changes their name.
he's going to change their name. So who do we have? We've got, give me the Hebrew names. I'll give you the first one, Daniel.
Wow. Crazy.
Who else? Who are his buddies?
Hananiah.
Hananiah. Hananiah.
Mishael,
Mishael. And
Azariah.
Azariah. Okay, now these guys are going to become something different. In fact, if I asked you, without reading this chapter, to tell me who Daniel's three friends are, I bet you know those names, and I bet you don't know the Hebrews. And so part of what Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do works even today for Bible students who will say, yeah, yeah. So what are their Babylonian names?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Okay, so I know Abednego is him because he starts with an A. Now we always pronounce it Abednego, but that's actually not what the name is. It's Abednego. Abednego. It's hard. I always mix it up and put the N in the wrong place. Yep, Rack, Shack, and Benny. Okay, so
Are we gonna watch Witch Kings?
we said we would have a Veggie Tales evening.
Well, wait, maybe people can come at 5 o'clock that time and watch it.
Yeah, we could watch the lead in. Okay, all right. So Mishael is going to be Meshach, and Hananiah is going to be Shadrach. And what about Daniel? Belteshazzar or Belteshazzar. All right. Who knows what Daniel means? I know Danny and Daniel do because they said it last week. Daniel means God is my judge. What do you notice about the name Belteshazzar?
It has a bell in it.
The bell. Okay, so Belteshazzar means Prince of Bel. Prince of Bel. All right, Hananiah. Well, we got this ending. So what's in their name? Just like Daniel and Mishael, right? What is El?
Of
What-
God.
So El is like Elohim. Ah is like Yahweh. Okay, so all of them, come from families. Well, we don't know anything about their families bringing them up, except we kind of do because we're going to see how they behave. We're going to see what their character is. But we know their families thought enough or were religious enough to name them using traditional Jewish names that contain the name of God. Hananiah is going to be beloved of God. Mishael is who is as God or who is like God. And Azariah is the Lord is my help. Now we're gonna come over here, we're gonna go Shadrach, he is illumined by the sun god. And Meshach is going to be who's like the moon god. And Abednego is going to be servant of, you guessed it, Nego. Okay? And the moon god, ultimately, is the one who's ultimately going to become Al-Elah, which has been shortened to Allah. So, Nebuchadnezzar renames them all with names of the Babylonian gods. So he kind of keeps the theme. He sort of says, hey, all right, you guys were named after your god. Guess what? I don't want you thinking about yourselves that way anymore. I want you thinking about my gods. Okay, so I'm going to name you that way. Now, who knows what they're going to study? What kind of stuff comes from Babylon?
Was that astrology?
Well, that's not fair if you like just tell me what I said.
Father, do you think it's definitely what?
What?
That's what you're trying to do.
I'm going to send the notes around. It's all in here if you want. But so what do you need?
I was just thinking that means.
So Prince of Bel, illumined by the sun god, who is like the moon god, right? So instead of who is like God, it's who's like the moon god, and then the Lord is my help becomes Abednego, the servant of Nego.
Yeah. You're not in fiction.
Bummer. Okay. All right. So what kind of stuff comes from Babylon? You said, I said, astrology. Yeah. By the way, why is that important?
Because astrology is not real. You don't use it in Christianity. Astrology is looking at the stars and gleaning meaning from the constellations and the alignment of them.
Is it the same as astronomy?
Nope. Astronomy is the study of the stars and the physics and the geometry about them.
So both of these things find roots in Babylon. But why is that? Why is that important in the Bible? Who comes to see?
Oh yeah, the stars and the wise men and the
Yeah, the Magi. We're going to find out, we think, that the reason the Magi come from the east at this time, because they've seen the star, is they knew what they were looking for. And why did they know what they were looking for? Because Daniel's going to give a prophecy in verse 9 or chapter 9, verse 27 about what time the Christ is going to be born. And so the Magi are this hereditary priesthood within Babylon. And what it looks like is that Daniel, who is going to be named ultimately over all the wise men of the kingdom, is going to teach some of this stuff that's going to get carried on and carried on and carried on until the time of Christ's birth, when suddenly the Magi showed up. And don't think of the Magi as showing up as like three guys on a camel. The three guys on three camels kind of riding out by themselves, right? At the time they show up, they're part of an empire called Parthia, which is, it's going to erase my map, but Israel's over here. So this is the Roman Empire down into Egypt. Parthia is over here, right? It's Iraq, Iran, India, kind of this area over here. And just as big as Rome, right? You don't really hear very much about it, but it's a big, and Rome and Parthia are fighting all the time. In fact, they go back and forth through Israel all the time to fight. Well, when the wise men show up, what's it say the city is, right? Herod is, yes, but how does he react? Herod was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Why? Why would you be troubled that three guys on camels showed up? You weren't. you were probably troubled that 3 guys who are high priests in the Babylonian priesthood show up probably with a military escort. And the role of the Magi in Parthia was to pick a king. And they were the guys they were the kingmakers. So now you've got these guys who show up in Jerusalem. Herod is this illegitimate king. He's been picked by the Romans. He's not like, nobody in Israel likes him, right? And what do they ask? What do these guys ask Herod? Where is he who is born King of the Jews? Well, if you're a guy sitting on the throne that you didn't inherit, you just got picked to be on the throne. Somebody said, hey, you look like you could be king, come on. And nobody likes you for that. And the kingmakers from the east show up and they say, well, hey, where's the real guy? No wonder he's upset. And no wonder all of Jerusalem is upset, probably because what's this, what's this expedition doing here? Right? Because they wouldn't have traveled from Babylon probably unprotected. So when you think about the story, I think there's a lot more to the story than just what we see on the Christmas cards of 3 guys riding their camel following a star. I think it's a nice visual, but I don't think that's actually what's happening. All right, so guess what? The idea of geometry, and in particular circular geometry, comes from Babylon. There are 360 degrees in a circle, and this is why we have 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. All of that's Babylonian stuff. It's why when you look at the Bible and you look at the time frame of a year in biblical terms is actually 360 days. And you go, wait, it's 365. Nope, when you read, like when we're going to do math, more math is coming. It won't be calculus, I'm sorry. I'll see if we can work some in, but probably not. It's just going to be multiplication. But we're going to find out that there's time periods that Daniel puts in the prophecies that he gets, and it's all based on 360-day years. So interestingly enough, it almost suggests that something happened to change it from a 360-day year to a 365-day year. And that's
Do you know the reason we have a 365-day year according to the Bible? Because to be honest, I only know the reason we have a 365-day year according to Egyptian mythology.
What does it say in Egyptian mythology?
So the
Very quickly.
So the sky goddess Nut was supposed to have kids with the earth goddess Gaia or something like that. Ra didn't want that to happen because he didn't want any more gods. And so he said that she couldn't have any babies that year. So she made like 5 whole new days to have these babies.
Interesting. Interesting. So so I don't really think that's how it happened or why it happened. But what's interesting is the Egyptians had a 360-day year, and they had to come up with an explanation to explain why it became 365. Now, if you want really like out there sci-fi stuff, there's all sorts of things about the orbit of Earth and the orbit of Mars, and how what it appears that they used to be exactly, like Mars used to be exactly 720 and the Earth used to be exactly 360, but there were times when the two passed close to each other and there's this transfer potentially of angular momentum. And so the Earth actually speeds up a little bit and Mars slows down a little bit, and that's why it's not exactly the same 2-to-1 ratio, but that's hard to prove. All right, last thing. We're not going to get through chapter 1, but we're going to get through this end of thing. Who are Daniel and his Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael? You get bonus points next week if you remember those names without looking at your notes. Who are they handed over to?
The eunuchs?
The chief of the eunuchs. Okay, Lauren, you told us who you thought that was and what their role was.
Yeah.
It was?
Oh, they're basically in charge of the king's harem, and they are castrated essentially, so they can't do anything with the king's harem.
All right, sounds like that's a pretty, reasonable guy to put in charge of the harem. Somebody who, has no tools to do anything with the harem, right? You can't trust him. Who are you going to trust? Okay, so that's one possibility. That certainly is a word or a use for the word. But the other word, and you read it, It's the king or the master of an official. So an official, or like a, I can't spell, that's Official, or a captain. And so our modern word eunuch, or the modern usage of eunuch, that we automatically think of somebody who was, singing on the soprano side of the choir, is not necessarily what the ancient word means. In fact, we find out that in 2 Kings, the term appears in a phrase that probably means an important government official. And in fact, one of Pharaoh's officials was a eunuch, and he was married. Okay, so which again doesn't mean he, I guess, had been castrated, but suggests that sometimes eunuch does mean the traditional meaning that Lauren said, and sometimes it just means a guy who's in charge of stuff. It's hard to say. These guys, Daniel and his buddies, are potentially going to become eunuchs in the court, but that would kind of be against Nebuchadnezzar's strategy, because under the Mosaic law, if you had a genital defect, you were excluded from the worshiping community. Right, so if you want to convince all the other Hebrews to follow Daniel and his friends and the other guys that were there with him, you probably don't want to start hacking off parts, because then the people might look at them and say, well, now you're not holy anymore. Now you're not part of the Hebrew community anymore. You can't even worship with us. Why would we listen to you at all that? Right. So I think it means more on the official side of things than it does on the eunuchy side of things. Okay. Let's stop there. We're halfway through. We will easily finish chapter 1 next time. Maybe. Yes. Yeah. Sure. We will.
We got these 7 verses.
We got these 7 verses. Yeah. I had hoped we could get through more, but still a lot of background. Like, we still talked about a lot of background stuff, right? With the names and things like that. Next week we're going to get into the action of what's going on and why Daniel and his buddies don't want to eat the king's food. I mean, if you came over and we said, hey, we've got the prime rib out, and we've got a really great wine, and who's ready for a plate? And you all said, yeah, no thanks. We're happy. You said no thanks, and the other half were like, yeah, that's great. That's good. I'll take me too. Those. Right? We'll talk about why that is what it is, or why it may be what it is. Right? We don't really know, but we've got some pretty good ideas as we look at the Mosaic law to figure out what's going on. Okay. All right. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel, same link, right? The Zoom link is the same every single time. So when you say, when you send out the link, it's in the chat. It's there for you. Okay, Lolo?
Yes, I heard you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll pray us out, okay?